Welcome back to the cave, Team Shatterproof. We're going to cover bow forms today. This is going to be a little bit of an extension upon the bow making course. And so I've got a couple questions recently about bow forms. So for you guys who are interested in how I glue up different bows or how I bend and make a recurve or a reflex deflex bow, this is the right video. So let's get right into it. Before we go over the bow forms today, I want to cover the heating options or the gluing up options, because you can do both. The first option is to glue up the bow with thin enough material that it can bend in itself, and then it glues in the shape you put it in. For example, this piece of bamboo, you could reflex it back because it's so thin. Maybe you grab another piece of wood, reflex them both back with a little bit of pressure without breaking the bow. You don't have to use any heat, and the glue will harden in that reflex state. And then when the glue is completely cured, you take off your clamps, you take it off the form, and there you have a reflexed or a recurved bow. So that's one option, no heat at all. Option number two is gonna be a paint gun or a heat gun, and you're gonna heat up the wood as you bend the wood. Now, I only recommend using a heat gun if the wood has over 10% moisture content. With Osage, you can get away with even less than that, but you need some moisture in the wood in order to use dry heat without burning it and without cracking it. Wet heat is always safer, and what I mean by wet heat is using steam or water. I like to just throw something together for steam, so I use a pot, just a normal pot here, and I cut a hole in the top. So I'll put the pot on the burner like this, and I'll put it full of water, or 3/4 full of water, so I've got plenty in there, and start boiling it. I'll put the lid on, and now all of the steam is redirected right through this hole. So, because I cut a hole in the lid. Just got a cheap pot from Walmart or Goodwill or something. But from there, I can redirect the steam to the bow. So, I built a janky contraption. This one right here is just PVC pipe, and then on the back side, I just have a little bracket here so that that can go over top of the hole and be steady. If I had this on a burner, it's steady enough. From there, you can put the limb in. The other option that does make this a little nicer is if you come up with it here, and then you use a T coming out, and then use your long PVC, or you can use ducting, anything that will just hold the steam, basically. But you can, PVC is strong enough that it's, with the water, with the steam in it, it hasn't melted on me yet. So you can do a T, go vertically, or instead of going up higher vertically, I was just using a scrap here, if you were gonna make a dedicated place, go horizontally with it, and then you can slide your bow in as far as you want. You could steam the entire bow at once, or you could just steam one limb at a time. And from here, you can correct any twist in the limb, or not twist, well, you could do twist, but any waviness, or you can add recurve or reflex. Now the third option to do is to just boil it in water. So here with the hole, I could just stick this in and let it boil in the water. Now, I do that for a recurve bow. I did that with a bamboo and Osage bow, and I recurved the bamboo and I recurved the Osage individually, and then I glued them up together after they were recurved. So the first form I want to show you to build is from a 2x4, maybe 2 3/4 inch pieces of plywood glued together or something like that. You just want it the width or larger than the bow you're going to use. So use the 2x4. You can put a screw in on opposite corners, and then grab any material you can find that's flexible. A couple ideas would be if you have any thin piece of metal. I had a drywall square from my construction, and I used that in the past. I used a piece of bamboo here in this example. You can also use an old arrow that's broken or something that you're not really worried about. It's a gradual enough of bend to reflex the bow that you can use an arrow to mark it, and you just want a consistent bend throughout the limb, and there you go. You've made a bow form. From there, you'll steam up your bow. Then you can clamp it on here and just clamp it all the way down until the whole thing's on the form. Wait until it is completely cool. Release it. It'll bounce back a little bit, but not very much. And you've got a reflex. Then you repeat the same thing on the other limb. This is the first type of form I would use. You could use this on basically any bow to reflex the limbs. That's how I would do it. I would recommend using the steam. Just use a basic form like this, but that'll give you a little bit more speed. And then when set happens, it's not going to go as far because you've already put that reflex in it, which is really nice. I definitely like to do that when I have the opportunity. A minute ago, I talked about recurving the Osage bamboo bow, and I recurved the bamboo and Osage individually. And with that, I used a form just like this. And so how I make this form is basically the same thing. Use something that can curve. Here I believe I grabbed some fiberglass and I put 2 screws in, and I realized I didn't like the shape between the 2 screws, so I wanted to bend a little bit more. So I marked where I wanted a 3rd screw, put that 3rd screw in, and then followed that shape. And again, I am eyeballing this. But what I ended with on the recurve is about 5 inches tall for 7 inches in length. So you could, if you wanted to copy this, you can do 7 inches over and then 5 inches up and then have your curve go between that. But this type of form is really nice. I like to leave this section on. That way I can put the bow in the form, and then you can even just drop it, put a little heat on the other end of the bow, and it'll naturally pull it over the form. And then for the thickness of the bow, I can put a wedge in there to make sure it stays tight. And with that, there's the recurve form. This is the form I used for bamboo Osage bow build and recurved it. Here's a bow I recurved. I started it. I haven't done anything yet else with it. This is an oak blank, and I recurved it here on this type of form. With the oak, since it was from the hardware store, since it was very dry, I boiled this wood and then recurved it. Now with this one, I would leave the recurve extra thick because I don't want that to bend really, and then I would have the working limb here when I finish this bow out. All right, I'm zooming out here for this 3rd type of bow form. This is the type where we'll use a glue up. So this is where I make my bamboo bows, bamboo and ipe in the past, or bamboo and Osage, or bamboo and oak, or bamboo and maple, whatever you're putting bamboo to. The bamboo is thin enough that you can create your reflex deflex without even heating the bow, and that's pretty cool. So let me show you how I would glue up or lay up this bow. First, here's my handle. Boom, the handle's going there. Secondly, I'll grab my belly material. I got a piece of ipe, and then I'll grab my power lamination. That power lamination will go 1 to 2 inches beyond the handle on either side, allowing a gradual fade out into the working limb. And then from there, I grab my piece of bamboo and lay it on top. I would throw probably 4 or 5 clamps on here, but for this example, I'll do 1 to make it quick. And then from here, on the ends of this form, you can see how I've got pieces of plywood here in the middle, and then in the mid limb is where these blocks, these square plywood blocks go. And then I've got 2x4s, the same length for the end. Now these 2x4s are gonna be about 2 inches taller than your handle if you're doing a reflex deflex blow like me. So I can put this underneath. You see it coming together. Put this underneath both sides, and you'll want them to be equal on either side. And then from there, take your clamp. You'll want to measure to make sure it's the same, but you can clamp down now the middle of the bow here, and that will create your reflex deflex bow. Now 2 inches is is actually a lot. And so maybe even 1 inch back would be better. But you kind of stand back and look at it and figure out what look you like. And the less reflex, deflex, the less you put in it, the easier to tiller. The more you put in it, the harder it would be to tiller. And you don't need anything special like EA40 to do this type of thing. Wood glue works great. Type bond 1, 2, or 3, anything like that. Like the bow I built in the bamboo Osage bow I built was just with, it was like Elmer's wood glue, yellow wood glue. I mean, it doesn't matter really in my experience. Wood glue can work great. But that's how I would do a reflex deflex bow form and build the bow just that simply. Now, from here, once you get the shape down, you can add a bunch of clamps to the bow like that. That's what I did on that Osage bamboo one. Or another method to clamp down is to get some inner tube tire. The middle of a bike, what is it? Tube? Inner tube? To get the inner tube tire of a bike. It's not the actual tire, what is it? Yeah. The other option is to grab the innards of a tire of a bike, the tubes, and you can wrap tightly around. If you do use this tire method, I like to do some plastic wrap on it. That way the glue doesn't seep onto the inner tubes. And you can just wrap it real tightly and that'll hold the whole thing together if you don't have a bunch of clamps. But even some heavy duty spring clamps can do it. If you've got the 2 layers flat, then it glues up easier than you might imagine. And right here, I've got the handle, the belly material, a power lamination, and the backing, and you can make a really sweet solid bow. Maybe if you want to step it up from a drywall tape backing, you can do this right here. Also, you can do this with just a solid piece of fiberglass, like bear paw fiberglass. You can do this exact same method as, and take out the bamboo for like the bear paw fiberglass or something like that. And I want to get more into that later, but that makes a really solid backing as well. There's my quick overview on bending and shaping and bow forms and that sort of thing. I don't have exact measurements. It's been trial and error for me that I use. The only thing I have exact measurements on are my fiberglass bows that I want to sell. Those are the only ones I've really documented. But like this sort of bow, I've made some pretty sweet ones, but I test out so many things. I don't have a specific amount I reflex or deflex the bow that I like the most necessarily. It just tends to vary from bow to bow for me. But lastly, real quick, I want to show you my fiberglass bow form, and I'll give you some decent measurements on that reflex deflex just so you can see what I like. Okay, so here's one of the bottom parts of the bow form. This sort of process is definitely different. I'll use this, and then I'll have the top piece, and I'll use a fire hose to really compress it and make the bow. But got 3 into 6. So basically at the handle, it's 3 inches below. So that'd come up on the reflex, or on the deflex 3 inches, and then it would fade out gradually back down. But what I've found is like, if I try to make this extreme of a form for a bamboo back bow, it may not be able to take it. The fiberglass can take a lot more. So there you have it. That's some basic information on bow forms and how I personally like to use them to bend wood, to shape wood, to make the bow how I like it to end up. I'm not super experienced on steaming wood or anything like that. I use a pretty basic system. And I know there's a lot of people who like to shape wood and steam it, make really cool chairs and things like that that I've seen on YouTube. And a lot of their methods are much better than what I do. I just have never invested a lot into it, or I try not to overbuild it since it really doesn't happen very often, and it's pretty simple to steam with just a piece of PVC pipe and a little bit of aluminum foil. So that's why I've done it the way I have. If you like to go all out, you could build something 10 times better than what I did. But in the end, it's just about getting the bow you want. So thanks for watching. Stay shatterproof. I'll see you guys around.